I will say as a father, especially a father to a daughter, by miles, the hardest thing to manage is how much suffering do you allow your child to experience?
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the ACT podcast. And again, I have a special guest. And the reason why I say this, because this man has become a friend and has become my mentor, which I've never had before. And I'm super excited to have him here because we have so much to share. Dave, thank you so much for joining the ACT podcast.
Roger, thanks so much for having me. And what better compliment that the fact that you consider me a mentor means the world to me.
Oh yeah, man, I really do. And we had a lot of discussion about this. And the fact, I've always heard people talk about having a mentor. And the reality is I've always been a mentor to other people. And not to say that I never had a mentor. I mean, when I was becoming a missionary, I had someone that mentored me, but just for a short period of time. But you're a different mentor. I mean, just the little conversations that we've been having, it's not only about business, but it's about life. And I think that is super important that we can relate to that aspect when it comes to life.
It's funny about that point. I think people think about business and their personal life as these two separate spheres, which they are in a way. I will say, with the exception of my two best friends from college, I think every close friend I've had has been someone I knew professionally and often worked with professionally. But it's like people think that they're separate spheres, but I think they're more the same. Or maybe it's that I feel like to really be sort of happy and fulfilled, you almost have to integrate them at some level. Because otherwise it almost implies like business is this other realm where maybe you're not really yourself.
Right.
And then this other one is, and I feel like you almost always get the best result by being as authentic as possible, which is easy to say and hard to do.
Yeah. I had this concept. I remember in one of the jobs I used to be a manager. And I had this idea of, and I'm using the word manager because that's what I was, right? And I used to tell the employees that, your business at home is your business at home. Work is work. And I always had this separation. But as soon as I started just spending more time with them, and of course with my other background of being such a personal, relational person, I love building relationships with people. I was like, hold up. Am I really separating the two? Because a lot of the times whenever I sat down with some of the employees, they had so many personal issues, which automatically brought issues into the company. And I stopped seeing them as a number or an employee. I started looking at them as people. They got problems. They got issues. So if they're not resolving their issues at home, they're automatically going to bring that into the business. Do you see that connection, or do you think that we should have this separation?
So
how do you separate it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't say for sure. You never know anything for certain, but my experience is that people think that what's best in business might not be what's best for the people that you're leading or managing. And I just have not found that to be the case. What I found is, if you're just purely self-interested and you don't care about other people and you behave in a certain way, you might get a better result in the very, very near term. But even in the medium term and certainly in the long term, You get the best result by by managing and leading the person first and the job second.
Mm,
Because everyone's had that. I think almost everyone's had the experience where you've worked for a boss who you knew genuinely gave a crap about you,
right.
and you do anything for that person. You don't want to
Mm,
disappoint that person, whatever. And you've worked for people that are just jerks,
right.
and you're going to do the minimum necessary for that person. And so, even if you're just purely self-interested, I would argue you'd still be better served. You'd serve yourself better to still be a decent human being. And
Mm,
so, but it's just, I just think it's a better way to travel through life, being decent.
yeah.
And I think you also get a better result. Like people think they're at odds with each other, but I don't think they are.
Yeah. 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 And I learned that because I think, whenever you spend time with people, um, people are really struggling with themselves. And what I've learned along the years I was in this company is, the more time I put into people, there was a difference when it came to them performing in the workplace. I mean, they were more excited. Of course, they weren't fulfilled, but you saw that there was a big difference with them coming to work and being more committed, being more communicative, and working as a team. So for me, that was really important. And it's interesting that I had to go through that process, um, because I was working for somebody and I was put in a position where I never knew exactly what I was doing. I was just doing it because it was just something that came natural to me. So I saw an issue and I was like, okay, how can I act differently and try to resolve the issue? And now fast forward, I have my own business where I need to apply those same principles, but kind of change certain things, but I'm still learning. And it's tough, especially when you're dealing with people. How do you how do you balance that out when you're running a business and you keep those personal things and you keep business, you know, it's like, hey, personal, but if your personal is affecting the business, I got to cut you off. Like how do you deal with that
I
stuff?
don't think I think it seems more complicated than it is. And I'm not saying there's never complications,
Mhm.
but my experience is they're pretty infrequent because so long as you can be politely honest,
Mm,
I mean, honesty is what it really boils down to. Like, I might have someone that works for me that I'm good friends with that I absolutely want the best for, and they're saying they want an increase in their salary, let's say,
mm,
right? And as their friend, I would love to give them exactly what they want, right? But at the end of the day, I'm not even doing. Let's say that I'm not even doing them a favor as their friend. Forget about their boss
mm,
by giving them just whatever they want. It has to make sense,
mm,
right? So, and same thing with like a job title too. Oh, I want to be, chief revenue officer, whatever it might be. I had someone come to me and say that to me once, and I was thinking to myself,
mhm,
you're not a chief revenue officer. That you don't have the skill set for that. Even if I gave you exactly what you wanted, it would actually backfire on you.
mm,
You'd be held accountable for the responsibilities of what a chief revenue officer would do. And then when you left this job because it's not going to work out for you, and you went to your next job and you were a chief revenue officer and you're trying to get another chief revenue officer job, that's not going to work out for you.
mm,
So I found that even when I have those slightly uncomfortable conversations, if I'm just honest and authentic about the situation and where someone's skill sets are, and my experience is almost universally, people are like, thank you for being honest with me. And what is the right path, Dave? When do you think I would be ready? What would I have to do between now and then in
mm,
order to be ready? And
mm.
now we're working on, hey, if you do these things, whatever, I think you'll be ready in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And now we're on the same page and we're rowing in the same direction. So
Wow.
I find that it's actually those things work themselves out easily. Where it blows up is where you're dishonest, even if you do it with the good intentions.
Wow. That's important that you said that. Honesty is one of the main things I think we all have to practice. It's being more sincere, more transparent, because in reality, you're not doing any good to somebody if you continue just gassing them up and not telling them reality. Hey, this is not you. You're not a singer, right? You're a writer. And I think a lot of the people, especially, I don't know, just because I'm getting older and I'm, spend more time with people, it's the feeling part, right? Oh, I want to do this. I like this, but is that really you? Is that your calling? I think a lot of people walk around not understanding their purpose, not understanding what they were called to do. They have the wrong identity. And I think a lot of people, especially young people, I teach a lot of the young people in my church. And I'm sitting down with them, and these are kids that are 16, 17 years old. And I'm asking a question like, what do you want to do? And they're like, I don't know. And I think a lot of kids today, they're bombarded with so much information, and they have so much, I would say, social media identity crisis. I just made that up. I don't know if it sounds kind of crazy, but they have so many references of so many different people and so many different careers out there that it's like, who do I really want to be? And they're just lost.
There's a book called The Paradox of Choice. And one of the examples it gives in the book, I don't remember the exact number because it's been a while since I read it, but I'll make the numbers up to make the point, which is there's 3 grocery stores that sell ketchup. One sells 2 brands of ketchup, one sells 6 brands of ketchup, and one sells 40 brands of ketchup. The one that sells 6 brands of ketchup is the one that sells the most. The 41, it's too confusing, kind of to your example. There's a billion things you could be, right? I could be a YouTuber, I could be a Instagrammer, I could be a TikToker or whatever. It's almost like it almost freezes people into making no decision because there's so many options. The store that sold 2 ketchups didn't sell enough because there wasn't enough choice. The one that had 40 was too much. 6 was kind of just right, Goldilocks.
Right.
But it's funny. I have a 24-year-old daughter who I recently convinced that after 2 years of a corporate job, her first job after college, which she did really well at, but she was absolutely miserable. So miserable that she's like, I hope I get hit by a truck on Sunday so I don't have to go to work on Monday.
My goodness.
So I'm like, honey, you got to quit. You got to quit that job.
Yeah.
So I was able to persuade her to do that. But as she's thinking about what she's doing next, and she's a very disciplined kid that, doesn't want to be living off of me. And so she wants to be independent. And I was like, take your time and figure out what speaks to you. And I said, it doesn't make sense to leave a job you're not happy and scramble to, go back to school, and maybe you study for a couple years and build up some, student loan debt. And then, or you take another job and you decide you don't want to do that. I know a bunch of people that have gone back to law school, racked up all this debt. And then when they're done, they hate being a lawyer, but they're like, well, I've told everyone I was going to be a lawyer. They're emotionally invested in being a lawyer now, and they're absolutely miserable. Take your time and figure it out. And one of the things that people don't do is it's actually not that hard if you're focused to figure out what you want to do, or at least what you even wouldn't want to do. Yeah. It's like, so my daughter was thinking, hey, I think I want to be a nutritionist. So my guidance to her was talk to a bunch of nutritionists that are 3, 5, 10, 15 years out from where you are now, and ask them about their lives, shadow them, whatever it might be. And after a month, she's like, yeah, I don't want to be a nutritionist. I'm like, that's wonderful. That's one of the best ways you could have spent the month, is figure out something you absolutely don't want to do instead of going back and getting a degree to be a nutritionist, and then interning as a nutritionist, and then getting a job, and then deciding you hate it. So take your time, especially when you're young. Everyone's in such a rush.
Yeah. I think that's society, right? Society wants you to grow up fast, but at the same time, it's based on what people see and what the people around you that you surround yourself with. And I think that's another important point is, who are you surrounding yourself with, right? Who are the people that are influencing you, that are causing you to deviate, or you look at other people and you say, oh, you know what? That person's already getting married. That person already has a career. And I always say this to a lot of people that I have meetings with. I'm like, never compare your life with other people. Your story is your story. Your journey is your journey. I don't know if it's a story at KFC, the founder of KFC. I think he came out with the KFC at 80 years old or something like that.
He was definitely older. He was definitely an older guy.
Super old. And I'm like, so everyone has its time. Now, do I want to succeed at that age? No. Right. But I think everyone has their story, their journey, and everyone needs to respect that. So I think a lot of the young people today, they have a lot of pressure. And again, I bring this back to social media. I think we're going to look back at this. History is going to tell and say, social media itself had a huge impact in the society that we live in today. Huge.
I think every generation has their own challenges, and there's
Yeah.
no doubt that this generation has a set of unique challenges. I think though that, because you talked about before about, trying to pursue that thing that you feel purpose,
Yeah.
it feels like a sense of
Yeah.
purpose.
Mhm.
I think though that in the meantime, because I think that doesn't necessarily, I know that doesn't come easily to anybody, but it's not like, oh, I think I'll spend this month and I'll find something that I have purpose in. That's not how life works. I think that if I were giving advice to anybody, especially someone younger, in the meantime, try to add things to your talent stack. So, at least once a year, maybe twice a year, try to add at least 1, 2 talents. They don't have to be in any way connected. It could be learn to play the drums.
Right.
Most people don't realize if you spend 18 minutes a day at any one thing in 1 year, I think it's 100 hours it works out to, you'll be in the top 5% of all people on the planet at whatever that thing is. Jiu-jitsu, playing the drums, writing, drawing, doesn't matter what it is. So do 36 minutes a day for a year, and year after year, add a couple of talents to your talent stack, and you'll be amazed at the opportunities that it open up to you. And then I would argue gives you a way better chance of finding that thing that you feel a sense of purpose towards.
Yeah. Does it come down to, because, just bringing it back to the example of that person coming into your office and asking for a certain position. Was that person asking for the position based on a higher salary, or was it because I want a better title and I know I can do it? What was it based on?
So,
Because I want to make a point.
yeah,
And why?
most people, even if it is just because they want the higher salary, which I think
Right.
is often the case,
Yeah.
they're not going to say it that way.
Right.
They're going to say, "Oh, I think I'm ready for this, and my experience, and this is perfect
Sure.
fit for me." I mean, again, I think it's so funny because most people fancy themselves as entrepreneurs, and most people just aren't wired that way. You have to have almost an unhealthy appetite for risk, like almost deranged appetite for risk to be an entrepreneur. People don't realize that. They think that, oh, you don't have a boss. You always have a boss. You have
Absolutely.
shareholders, you have investors, you have all your employees.
Yep.
Like a good executive feels an unbelievable amount of responsibility to the people that have a job and an income because of the business they're running.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel that way, that's a bigger problem.
Absolutely. This is why I like having, these conversations with you, because again, it opens my eyes to the reality of what it is to be an entrepreneur. And a lot of people, they choose their careers based on money. And I think that is a dangerous slope to go on, because it doesn't last. Having this conversation with my wife, she was at that point. She was miserable at her job. I mean, she was getting paid really good. She was working at an investment bank, and the benefits were just amazing. But she would come home every single day miserable. And that would affect the marriage, right? We were having some marriage issues, and not to the point of divorce, but it was getting to the point where this is getting really bad. She was super stressed. And I was like, man, is this even worth it? Yeah, we got more money to travel. We got more money to do this and this and that, but she was just completely unhappy. And, she, I think I've spent a lot of time praying. And this is the honest truth, because I saw my wife and I was like, I need to do something about this. I can't continue seeing her like this. And I remember I would spend time with my brother praying for her, praying, about the situation. And, she had a very serious accident on a scooter. She got on a scooter. She doesn't even know how to ride a bike. I'm putting her out there. She's going to kill me. And she fell off the scooter and she destroyed her knee. Doctors saw it and they said, what did you do? Did you get in a car accident? That's how bad it was. And she just fell on her.
Yeah.
So she was she couldn't work for about 6 months. She's still getting paid. But this time that she stayed, it was a terrible time for her. She was going through a lot. But it was a time for her to reflect. And then COVID came along. And then she was just like thinking, she was like, man, I was completely unhappy. I don't want to go back to work. And then it just snapped.
It's funny. We talk about honesty, and when people talk about honesty, they mostly mean honesty towards others. The hardest thing for most people is to be honest with themselves about what they want,
Man.
whether it's in a relationship, in
Yeah.
a job, in a friendship. People can't be honest because if you're honest and it's not what you want, now you have to do something about it. And so much of, I think, people's unhappiness stems from the fact that it's really just the avoidance of conflict and not being able to be honest with themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's important. I think me and my wife, we learned that aspect, as a couple, her going through this. And I said, you know what, if I have to take 2 jobs in order for you to stay home and just figure this out, we're going to do it. And God blessed. I mean, everything worked out. Today, she's doing what she loves doing. She's spending more time just figuring things out. And we have a much more healthier marriage. And that automatically helps me build this company. And again, it goes back to that aspect. My business is a reflection of my lifestyle. If I have an unhealthy lifestyle, it's going to affect the growth of the company. It's going to affect the relationships that I try to build with people. They will see that automatically. If I'm having a conversation with you, I know you'll probably feel it and be like, yeah, Roger, there's something wrong with Roger. He's going through something and he's going to lose it. And I guarantee you would not want to do business with me at all if that was the case. So I think, your marriage, your relationships at home is important, and I'm curious, how do you see that in your personal life? You're married. How do you see that in your life, and how does that affect your business and being a CEO and running a business?
Well, there's a lot in that question.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the wife. So I used to be at this crypto company, and my wife was basically the trainer for the same crypto company. And she was making really good money.
Personal trainer, right?
Personal trainer, yeah. She also, meal plans, fitness plans, all that stuff. We had a gym at the office, and she would train people there before work, during the day and after work. She's working like 14-hour days, making good money, a lot of dead time in the, the middle of the day. And she was absolutely miserable. And I was like, Sina, like, your income changes our life exactly zero. Like why? And the reason she was doing it was she was getting so much external validation from her family, primarily. Oh, we're so proud of you. And that, that's what filled her cup. But eventually she realized, am I living my life for me or my family?
Oh man, yeah.
And I said, my opinion, look, because here's the other thing I think in a healthy relationship. I'll give my wife my point of view and my reasons. It's really important not just to tell someone what you think, but why you think it, right? Here are the reasons why I think this. I could be wrong about any of these things, but just think about what I'm saying. And I said, look, my personal opinion, I would rather you just be a force multiplier for me. Take care of me, do the things that you want to do the things that make you happy. And oh my God, it's like our relationship's always been pretty good. We had a little rough patch in the first year or so, but other than that, I think because we are so honest with each other about, what our wants and needs are, and what we do it without an expectation that the other person has to do anything. One of the rules we have that we agreed to pretty early in our relationship is we never make the other person do something they don't want to, even if it's something that's reasonably important to me.
Yeah.
So if have a family, thing I'm supposed to go to and I want her to come and she says, I don't feel like traveling, she doesn't come. I was taking vacation in Cartagena, and my dad and stepmom were coming. My daughter and her boyfriend were coming. And Sina's like, I've been traveling a bunch. We've been in Dubai for like 10 days. She was just over traveling. She was like, I don't want to come. I said, don't come. And it wasn't like, I was upset or angry with her. I'm like, right. Hey, look, you do you.
You understood the situation.
Yeah. And I just feel like, and again, I think that the rules of the road in relationships and work, I think they're the same. I think when you do it right, they're the same, or they're pretty damn close.
Yeah. I think so too. And I think that's really healthy. For me, I have this kind of the same experience too. It was really hard for me because there's certain principles that I stand on. And those principles are my guidelines, right? Of how to live my life. right? And this is where I bring scripture in, and this is how I see scripture as a manual for me. There's a lot of things as a person, as a human being that I don't understand of myself. And this kind of gives me these guidelines. Okay, how should I run my family? How should I treat my wife? How should I be the man of the house? And I had to learn a lot of these things by applying. And one of the things that, my wife, she had a way of thinking, right? I lived a crazy life. She didn't live that crazy life, but she got to a certain age. She was like, you know what does that crazy life look like? What is it going to a club? How is it going to, a place and drinking a little bit? She never experienced that. And then it got to a point where she wanted to experience that. So as a man, as a Christian man with principles, I let go of that lifestyle. I don't partake of that anymore. And she doesn't either. But now the curiosity is in her mind now, and she's thinking to herself, what is it? I don't know what it is. So my first reaction to it was, don't do it. Don't do it. I don't think it's a good idea. So having that honest conversation with her, because this is one of the things that I always do with my students when I'm talking about God or anything, is your conviction needs to be personal. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be something that you decide. Your parents can't decide it for you. Your mom can't do it. Your husband, your wife, whatever. No one can make that decision for you. You need to make that decision yourself. You need to experience it. I can't do it. I know why I don't do it. I experienced it and God showed me his hand and I said, no, that's it. I want to have a new life. I don't need that anymore. But she needed to experience it. And I'm so amazed because we are having these conversations. She experienced it. She came back and then she's like, okay, I get it.
Right.
I get it. So now I'm like, cool. Because it's funny because we want to teach others these things, but then when it comes to our home, we don't want to apply it.
The thing I realized,
hypocrisy. It's just, you're being a hypocrite.
I mean, I think hypocrisy, it's almost impossible to be a human being and not to have
it's
that.
in there, right?
It's just part of being human. It's part of
Right.
the DNA. I try really hard. To me, the people who are like, do as I say, not as I do, I really choke on that. I really do. I try really, really hard to not do that. I think I'm mostly successful, but there's a concept that's really important to me, and I try to teach it. I've taught it to my wife. I've tried to teach it to my daughter or anyone that I care about, which is the concept of being truly outcome independent. Which is, people misinterpret that. They think that, oh, you're just ambivalent or you don't care. It's not about that. It's about focusing on the things that I can control and letting go of the things that I can't. And wanting a particular outcome isn't going to change it. Now, your actions can change it, but your wanting isn't. And so it's the only thing you and I talked about this once before, the only thing I can't be outcome independent about, no matter what I do, is my daughter. Something bad happens there, I'm a mess, right?
Yeah.
Everything else I could be outcome independent about in a way that people don't even believe me. Like as an example, I literally cannot feel jealous. It's impossible. I haven't always been that way. And I have a very attractive wife, and it'd be easy to, she would be a hard person to be with if you were a jealous person.
Right.
But the reality is, and I will be very surprised if our relationship doesn't stand the test of time. We've been together for 8 years, never said an unkind word to each other, which is unheard of. So I think our odds are really good. With that being said, I am 100% outcome independent about my relationship.
Wow.
People don't believe it, but I'm telling you, if I came home from work today and she's like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. I met someone else, whatever, it wouldn't matter. It's, I don't even see there as an alternative. It doesn't even make sense to me logically because I either care about this person, and if another person made her happier than I did, then what kind of person am I to say, well, no, stay with me and be miserable. Wow. Don't be happy. And how could that be satisfying to me? So I'm not saying I wouldn't feel a sense of loss or my feelings wouldn't be hurt. Yeah, of course. But at the end of the day, there's only one possibility. So I'm completely outcome independent in my relationship. And probably in large part, or certainly a decent part of the reason why we probably will stay together is because of my outcome independence. As a result of that, I will tolerate, and again, my wife's amazing. She treats me better than anyone has ever treated me in my life. With that being said, part of the reason that's true is because that's my expectation. Because I'm outcome independent about the relationship. If my partner, I mean, the reason I got divorced was it was really, for my first wife, was because it was really clear that she didn't really like me very much.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I'm not going to stay with someone who doesn't want to be with me. That doesn't make sense to me. So outcome independence, and it's true about job. It's true about, your job, your career, your friendships. And, if someone doesn't want to be my friend anymore, okay. That's fine.
I'll go to sleep.
And again, it's not about not caring. It's about focus on the things that you can control and invest your energy where you get a return of energy back.
Yeah. You see, I love having these conversations, especially with, our entrepreneurs and, people with your experience, because there is there is a switch. I don't know what happens, but your minds work differently. How you deal with stress, how do you deal with issues? And I do believe that it's not for everybody. I know you mentioned that before. Being an entrepreneur, running a business, being a leader is not for everybody, and I'm always, there's these events that they have, right? These mastermind events. And then everyone goes to these Tony Robbins events and everyone is there. And out of like 2,000 people, and I'm always looking at all these people. And I went to one of the Tony Robbins, and it's amazing. And I'm like, all these people believe that they are leaders. They all believe it. But maybe just a handful are truly called to be leaders.
I think the stat is 80% of people think they're above average.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, that's just built into how it is. Yeah. And again, it comes back to what I keep saying, honesty. Got to be honest with yourself.
Exactly.
It's, I have almost a unhealthy, focus on trying to look for my blind spot, because I've seen people who are way smarter than me have blind spots you could drive a truck through. And I'm like, I don't want that to ever be me. And so part of what I do to do the best I can to ensure that I don't have a blind spot is I have people around me, my wife, my brother, my dad, who will tell me the truth, even if it's hard to hear. And I also am, I think I have a decent level of humility that allows me to be wrong. Because I think once you become emotionally invested in being right, being the smartest person in the room, always having the answer, you take someone like a Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, brilliant people, way smarter than me. But they have blind spots because they're emotionally invested in being right. I'm not. I have very strong positions loosely held.
Yeah, I always tell people that there's a difference between being smart and wise. There's a huge difference. Being smart, you can outsmart me all day, but being wise is a whole different thing. And I think, we had this conversation about, being honest with yourself, understanding your flaws. I think people see that as weakness, and it's not. I think it is a form of looking at your flaws, coming to the point where you realize that there's a flaw and saying, you know what can I do to fix this? And letting that pride go and saying, you know what, I can change this. It doesn't have to be this way. Thanks for your input. That's very important.
I mean, I have a perfect example about that, about being like, I can pay a lot of attention to detail when I absolutely need to. It is not my natural way of being. It takes a lot of effort for me to be that way. So if I'm not honest with myself about that, I'll make bad decisions. So I recently brought on a new chief operating officer he's way better at that. Well, one, he's smarter than me, but two, he's just better at the detail than I'll ever be.
Right.
And so it's way smarter for me to surround myself with people that are good at the things, better at the things than I am, at things that are important, that have to be done, and they have to be done well. If I'm not honest with myself, I make a different decision. Well, I could do that. It also comes down to and we've talked about this a little bit about humility and how important it is, I think, because for me, my goal is not happiness. My goal is contentment.
Oh
And,
man.
and
Yeah.
I feel that the only way you can be content is you have to have a fairly high level of humility. And like for me, I feel fortunate, not special. And I think that's a big, people talk about, they'll say, oh, he's gifted. That person's gifted, a gifted pianist, a gifted mathematician, a gifted, soccer player, whatever it might be. Way better to feel gifted than talented. Because Kobe Bryant talked about this too, where he would say, one of the biggest curses you can have is having a tremendous amount of talent, because then you can get by on your talent for so long. It's that person that, that gets 1% better every day because they're really working at it, the grinder. I mean, everyone had said people like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, they didn't have the most natural talent. And yeah, you'll find someone like a LeBron James who probably had just more natural gifts to start with. And you can also be great with natural gifts and hard work, but you can also be the greatest ever just because you worked harder than everybody else. But you can't do that if you think you're special. I think you can only do that if you think you're fortunate.
Oh man, that's deep. I like that. Yeah, because that's something I had to learn so much. I think, running the business, I've always tried to do it myself. This was way in the beginning when I thought to myself, I said, you know what, let me do it this way. No one can do it my way. It has to be this way and this and that. And I saw myself burning myself out. It was just like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to run a company if I continue thinking this way. So again, I had to just break out of that mindset and say, I need help. I can't do this by myself. That's when I brought in, my first person that I ever hired. And I was like, can I trust this guy? Is this guy going to be able to do the work? And it was so cringing. It was so hard. But then later on, I just started seeing, man, he does it better. He does it better. And what's funny is that he thought that I was doing it better. And I was like, no, I got you because you're doing it better. So do it better. And that to me, again, you start learning. When you start letting go, that's when the learning and you start seeing the growth. But if you don't let go of those things, it's just, you don't grow.
Well, and you have to, and it's not just in more entrepreneurial situations, but I think just in business in general, even if you're over the top, smart and talented and experienced, even if you're in that 1%, you're still going to be wrong something like 30% of the time. And that's if you're off the charts. Amazing. So if you can't adjust and make, hire fast, fire fast, that kind of stuff, like you've got to break some eggs to make an omelet. It's just how it is. And every time you take an action, and people really underestimate this. I'm not saying I try really hard. And I think I'm better than most executives at making data-driven decisions. With that being said, I don't wait for perfect information because it's not possible. Let me get 60, 70, 80% of the information. Let me get a directional idea about what the right decision is and pull the trigger, and then watch and be open to the fact that that decision could have been wrong and make adjustments. A top tier in the last year since I've been here, I could rattle off 20 mistakes I made, but I fixed them quickly. And I would argue that while they were mistakes, if I'd made the right decision, I wouldn't have known whether I was lucky or good, And so you've got to make decisions, make wrong decisions. That's okay. But make the adjustments with an open mind to being wrong, and ultimately you'll make way better decisions.
Yeah. The mind is a battlefield. I think, when it comes to decisions, you're not just making decisions by yourself. You're making decisions that's going to affect the whole team. And, again, that's a lot of pressure when you're thinking about, hey, I have to pay everyone's salary. If I make this mistake, this could happen. If this person's not happy, if this guy pulls out, this is going to happen. So there's so many things going on in your mind where, a friend of mine that runs a business, I talk to him a lot too. And he says, the longer you're in the game, you start growing this thick skin. You just grow layers of skin. And you just get better at dealing with it all the time. The problems are the same. Sometimes they increase, but you know how to deal with it. It's the same thing. And I'm feeling that happening now. Something happened last week, which probably a year ago, I was like in despair.
Right.
I was going crazy, but now I'm like, okay, next.
I don't think this is probably just a shortcoming of mine. I don't think I've developed thick skin, unfortunately.
Man,
I wish I did.
This is how you're built.
I wish
You're
I
built.
did. Like I'm, had to let someone go last week, and I just agonized over it. Not because I didn't know it was the right decision, but it's just you're affecting somebody else's life, and so I think that people are calloused about that, and they don't. I almost think it's worse if you can make decisions like that and just be nonchalant or cavalier about it, like, oh, whatever. No, it's that to me is a huge red flag. But even too, for me, it's like a muscle. It's like anything else. When you face challenges that in the moment, you have absolutely no idea how to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know if there is a solution. But once you've had that panic happen to you 3, 5, 15, 20 times in your career, all of a sudden you realize, hey, the other 20 times it happened, I found answers 18 out of the 20 times. 2 times I was royally screwed. But the majority of the time, I found a path through it. There's probably a path through this one too. Like, let's just buckle down and put one foot in front of the other, and the answers usually will become clear so long as you can keep yourself out of that fight or flight, frame of mind.
Right.
Because panicking, you never make better decisions than panic.
That's what I'm always concerned about is the panic, right? Because you always panic, and then you get to the point where, okay, I'll just take on anything just to kind of just put a Band-Aid on it. And it's not resolving the problem.
Sometimes it even makes it worse.
It makes it worse.
Yeah.
It makes it worse. And I know that for a fact, Dave, I know that for a fact. But this is why I go back to the point of mentorship. Having somebody like you, mentoring somebody is so important for an entrepreneur who's starting out. Because again, people need direction. They need guidance. And I love being that person to guide someone through something, through a problem. And I'm completely against the idea of, sometimes, being a son of an immigrant. My parents, when they got here, they went through a lot of hardships. They went through a lot of difficulties. But it was the country of opportunity. So, they made it, and they did something for their lives and stuff like that. We weren't rich or anything like that, but they had a comfortable life. And when other people came to the States, my parents, they would do everything they could for them not to go through a certain period of that suffering, but try to uplift them and try to help them get over that. And I constantly saw my father do that. And I think that's something that's in me, to not want to see somebody go through what I went through. For example, I went through addiction. I went through certain things. And I'm like, what can I do, or what can I say to a young person that's going to convince him that that's not the way to go, right? There's another alternative. There's another way, and impact that person's life, So I think, again, being a mentor, having a mentor, having someone to help you along the way, I think it's so gratifying. To me, I feel purpose. That's my purpose.
So suffering is a really interesting one, because I will say, as a father, especially a father to a daughter, by miles, the hardest thing to manage is how much suffering do you allow your child to experience? Because your knee jerk is you want them to experience no suffering. There is nothing worse you can do to damage a child than to let them have no suffering, no hardship, whatever. When I think about what I believe are my best qualities, I can trace every single one of them, with no exception, back to bad stuff that happened in my life. I can trace none of my good qualities to good things that happened in my life. None. But there's also, I also don't want the hardship to be, my daughter's homeless on the street, not having a food to eat, right? So there's a threshold, but I think that that's true. I think that if you don't allow people to experience the journey, you're actually stealing from them.
Oh, okay. Let's go into that. Yeah. I think that's important because I want my what I said to kind of resonate with that, right? Because I think that's very important because that idea of, okay, you help the person out, but to think that that person is not going to go through things. And I think that idea of that person going through the hardships makes the person who they are. And I think it's important. I think it's part of who we are.
Look, when I was I was a pretty good athlete growing up, played a bunch of sports. The one sport I had zero interest in doing was wrestling. My older brother wrestled, my dad had wrestled, and I was a pretty good kid. I don't think I got punished ever in my entire childhood. My older brother took care of that. He got punished. He was grounded for eternity. So he took care of all the punishment. But I remember when I turned 13, my dad told me, I was like 3 feet tall. He's like, you're not going out for the basketball team. You're 3 feet tall. But you have to go out for the wrestling team. I'm like, I'm not going out for the wrestling team. He said, you don't have a choice.
You do got the body though.
Well, I do now. Back then, I weighed 65 pounds.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I didn't know muscle, believe me. But my dad, it's the only time in my entire childhood my father ever told me I didn't have a choice. He's like, you're going out for the wrestling team, whether you like it or not. He said, after 2 weeks, you can quit if you want. He said, but you have to go out for 2 weeks, which guaranteed I'd miss basketball tryouts because they're at the same time.
Right.
So I remember I was wrestling and there was a kid who had been wrestling for a couple years, so he's more experienced than me. But my brother, probably because he'd been giving me daily beatings and wrestling with me my whole life, I must have absorbed a few things. And the way it works in wrestling is the person gets the varsity spot. You have a wrestle off if there's more than one person in the same weight class. And this kid who was, he was trying to intimidate me to quit the team. He was a bully, And so anyway, it was a close match, but I won the wrestle off and he ran out of the room crying and never wrestled again. And I'm like, I love this sport. Dang. And wrestling changed the entire course of my life. There is so much suffering involved in wrestling.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, the cutting weight, from the time I was 13 to the time I finished college, from November to March, I would cut between 15 and 22 pounds a week, every week for that entire time. I'd probably be 2 inches taller if it wasn't for all the weight I was cutting because I wasn't eating, let alone, anyway. But that suffering was a great proxy for other kinds of suffering, like being homeless on the street and so forth. I could have eaten, but I was living like a homeless person who couldn't eat because I wasn't eating either.
Wow.
But that suffering was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And my self-confidence and my ability to persevere and come out the other side. Because I always joke in wrestling, there's 3 kinds of wrestlers. There's the guys who are making excuses about why they're going to lose before they even step on the mat. There's the guy like me who's so terrified of losing that they will prepare like a lunatic, right? So that they don't be embarrassed. But the best wrestlers are kind of sociopaths. They like to fight. They want to hurt somebody. They tend to be the best. But anyway, it was just such a useful experience for me, and I have so much gratitude and if I had a son, I would absolutely demand that he wrestle.
Yeah, I think that's important. I've seen so much benefit in, when I see people going into the army, anything that requires discipline,
right,
and hardship. I think it really builds the person's character. It really chips off the things that are not working in your life. And it teaches you what discipline looks like. So I think we have been built a certain way that if we don't apply those things, well, not apply, if we don't embrace, right? You talked about being content. And Paul, he was an apostle of Jesus, and he talks about, being content in every circumstance. And he talks about, I want to read it here because I think it's very interesting because this kind of ties in what you're saying. It says here in Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 to 13, he says here, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. It's awesome.
So that's another way of saying he's outcome independent.
There you go. That's why I've got that verse that I was going to tie it into this, but it ties back into what we're talking about because it's that mindset of whatever the circumstances, whatever the situation is, you understand your purpose. You are content no matter what. And this is why it goes back to that purpose. Why are you really doing that? Why are you really accepting that job? Because if it's for the money, you will not be content. You will not be satisfied. It is not going to last. So the suffering, the hardships that we go through, and again, I'm reminded of the story, Jesus going into the desert for 40 days fasting. A lot of people look at that and say, it's something spiritual. It is so profound what he had to do because he was preparing for something beyond our understanding or comprehension mentally. And for the fact that he had to do this for 40 days, and after the 40 days, he's there and he's getting tempted by the enemy, show that the human perspective was, you're weak. This guy's 40 days without eating, with nothing. And the enemy comes along and says, I'm going to attack him at his weakest moment, his weakest point. It was the complete opposite. While he thought he was weak, he was strong because he was completely dependent on God. Not on material things, not on nothing. Everything the enemy tried to bring at him, he's trying to say, hey, listen, if you bow down to me, I will give you all the riches, give you everything that you want, all the comfort. And Jesus goes, it is written. He defends himself by the word. Second time, hey, if you're God, you can turn these stones into bread. You're hungry. You can do that. He didn't do it. So he was content in that situation. It's just amazing what you can put your mind to, that you can build strength by putting your body through so much stress. And that's why science today, when you go to cold plunge, you do all these things, it shows benefit. Put your body, your mind through stress, the right stress, and it benefits your mind.
I think one of the most dangerous things in life is being comfortable.
Man.
Because, and again, and stress can just be a hard workout, a cold plunge, a cold shower, whatever it might be. I remember it was a few years ago, the gym I was working out at, had one of these Biggest Loser weight loss competition things. And I put on a few pounds and I just decided that I was going to do this. And the reason I did it was I wanted to see if I could find the old version of me back when I was in college wrestler, where I was I would work out. I'll probably average 5 hours of working out a day, 6 days a week, and maybe I had 1 day of rest. And anyway, so I did this weight loss competition, and I was like a lunatic. I mean, it's probably one of the few times my wife didn't like me very much. She was like, "What is wrong with you?" But it was such a
you challenge yourself.
It was such a liberating. It was only 6 weeks. I lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks.
Wow.
I won the competition. I literally lost twice as much as the next closest person. I just wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to see if I could find that beast in me again. That would be like, I could push as hard as I want. And it's just knowing that I'm still capable of that is an incredibly satisfying feeling. And I feel like most people, that it's just a good exercise once a year, do something that's a real physical challenge. Do a Tough Mudder, do a marathon, something, just to prove to yourself that you can buckle down and when the chips are down and find that part of you that finds a way to win.
Oh man, I like that. You got to do that. And that's something I'm learning. At the certain age that I'm at, I'm like, man, I got to challenge myself more. I got to push myself more. I got to push my body. I got to take care of my body. And it's so important for us to do that because again, there's so many people that rely on us. And I don't want to say a lot of people, but I do believe that if you take on a leadership position, and you become a voice, just like what we're doing right now, understand that you have a responsibility with your public, with the people that follow you, and your example, your, being honest and everything. We're not perfect. I'm far from being perfect.
True that.
But I strive and I do everything I can to do better. And it is important for us to be an inspiration to those who need that, especially the young people. I'm very targeted towards young people because I know what I went through as a young kid and I didn't have that. My examples were drug dealers, and I wanted to be like them, and, to their defense, they had a rough upbringing as well. And they didn't have the examples in their lives. So it's like a domino effect. How can we break the curse? How can we break that and say, there's another opportunity. There's another way. So it's my responsibility to take care of myself in order to be, to leave a legacy, to others, for others to be inspired. That to me is important. That drives me. That's what pushes me.
Well, for me, I mean, I'm 58 years old. I have to be here for my daughter, So
you
it's
say
like
that a lot, and you get emotional. You get teary-eyed.
Yeah.
You get teary-eyed whenever your daughter's mentioned. And I want to go into that. What do you think that is, that you get so emotionally attached to your daughter? What does that mean to you?
I can't be certain how much of it is because of how hard I had to fight to have a relationship with my daughter. I don't know if it would have been the same otherwise, because I obviously only have the experience I have I don't have anything to compare it to. But I think it was, so I got divorced when my daughter was only 1, and my wife moved away with my daughter without my agreeing to it. Had a long distance relationship for a couple of years. Then I relocated. Then she threatened to move again. It was a very messy situation. And don't get me wrong, my ex-wife was a wonderful mom in many ways. I don't want to badmouth her. It's not about that. But I did have to fight some tremendous battles to have a relationship with my daughter. And it was the thing I was most afraid of. In fact, it's probably the only thing I was afraid of. I'm not afraid of death. So when I faced, the story, I faced death when I was 24. I was misdiagnosed by 3 doctors, told I had 6 months to live, get your affairs in order. I'd face death. I'm not scared of death. I don't want to die.
Hold up, guys. I don't want you to pass this, because this ties into this.
Right.
Because this changes your perspective of life, because a lot of people don't understand what makes you who you are today. There's things that you go through in life that change the way you see life and how you deal with things. And you are a person that, for me, just knowing you such a short period of time, you are a giver. You give a lot of yourself to a lot of people. Maybe not a lot of people, but to certain people. And that is not everyone can do that. But that situation that you went through, tying in with your daughter, you got misdiagnosed that you were going to die. Can you explain that? What happened there?
So I'll give you the short version. I was on a consulting project in a city that wasn't my home city. I had childhood asthma, so I would get bronchitis once a year, pretty regular. So I thought I just had bronchitis, and I went to go see a doctor, not my normal doctor. He gives me antibiotics. I don't get better. He gives me more antibiotics. I don't get better. He said, well, come in and let me take a chest x-ray. Maybe you have walking pneumonia. I'm 24 years old. I'm like one of the healthiest people I know. It never even crosses my mind that there could be anything seriously wrong with me. So he takes the chest x-ray. First thing in the morning, I get what I realized in hindsight was a panicked phone call around noon. I need to see you right away. I go in and he's like, your lungs are clear. That's not the problem. The reason you're having trouble breathing is there's a mass the size of a softball in the middle of your chest, and it's pinching your trachea shut like a straw. And he goes, he goes, I used to be a thoracic surgeon before I was a general practitioner. There is no benign condition that presents this way. You have serious stage 4 cancer for sure.
Stage
Like there's no
4.
way, he said, because there's no way it could be this big
Right.
and not have metastasized.
Right.
It's not possible. So he's like, I'm sure you think I'm a quack, which is exactly what I thought. So he goes, I set up an appointment it was in St. Louis at the time, Barnes Hospital with the head of oncology there. So for a second opinion, I didn't even tell my parents. I get a CT scan. I see him and he's like, 6 months, get your affairs in order. So now I tell my parents, I'm originally from New York. At the time, probably the best cancer hospital on the planet was Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City. My dad knew a head nurse there. He's like, those quacks in the Midwest don't know what they're doing. He gets me in to see the head of oncology at Sloan Kettering. Another CT scan, get your affairs in order. You have 6 months. So when the head of oncology at Sloan Kettering says you're going to be dead in 6 months, you believe them. So I genuinely thought, now it was weird. Like intellectually, I thought I would be dead in 6 months. Emotionally, I didn't feel that way. I didn't know why or how, but and quite frankly, the other interesting lesson I learned that I think is useful as you get older is it is so much harder on the people that care about the person that's sick than the person is sick. My parents are basket cases. I was so focused on keeping them from jumping off a ledge. I wasn't really that focused on myself. At least you feel some sense of agency, like I can choose what doctor I have or what hospital I go to or whether I get chemo or not. Like you feel like you're making some choices, right? But when you're just someone who cares about that person, you just feel helpless. And I could see that. And I can only imagine that, then I didn't have a child. I couldn't even imagine it, but I can imagine it now. And my God, I would be a basket case too.
Yeah.
And so anyway, long story short, they never even looked at the CT scans. Okay. They were intellectually lazy because what I had was so rare. There have been 2 medically documented cases ever of what I had. It was a completely benign congenital bronchiogenic cyst. They drained it. And 3 days later, I was back in the gym.
Wow.
So, so I went.
So what was that period of 6? Hold up.
So it was about a month. It was about a month from the first misdiagnosis to you're going to be fine. But I remember I was at Sloan Kettering because they pumped me full of antibiotics because of the surgery. Everyone around me is dying because this is where you go when you have stage 4 cancer. The guy in the bed next to me just had his leg amputated. The guy in the room next to me had his lung removed. Like everyone around you is dying. And I'm in the hospital and I'm going to be fine. Right. And so you have this weird survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
And I remember being in my hospital bed promising, I was spiritual, but I'm not, formally religious. So I guess what you would think of, I basically said to God or said, look, if I have an opportunity to touch anyone's life in a positive way, I will.
Yeah.
And I think I've stuck to that pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but circling all the way back to my daughter, that's the only thing I feared was not having a relationship with her. Because even death didn't scare me, but that terrified me.
Yeah. That's deep, man. Every time I see you mentioning that and I see how you get emotional about it. And I love seeing that, man. I love seeing it because it does, it's something I talked to my wife about. I said, I don't know how I would feel to have a daughter. Right now we're having trouble, for her getting pregnant and she's in Brazil right now, just doing treatment and she has some issues. I have some issues. And, and I see people who, don't even know the gift that they have of having a child and having some people just disregard that or just not really pay attention to it, just have kids easy. And I'm like, man, so much value. So I really admire you. I really, we call it a holy jealousy, right? And I envy you on that because it's a gift. It's a blessing for you to have the relationship that you have with your daughter.
I mean, I'm so lucky. I mean, my relationship is better than I could have, even in my wildest imagination, imagine that I could have. It is absolutely a blessing. I would say that it can be both a blessing and a curse, like most things, because that's the only thing that can wreck me is her.
Yeah.
So,
God, he says that he is a jealous God and people look at that and say, how can God be jealous and this and that? Yeah, but understand that God doesn't just look at you as a device, as something that he just threw together and that's it. He sees us as precious as his children. He created us in his image and he is jealous. And when we don't spend time with him and we ignore him, can you imagine your daughter not picking up your phone call? Can you imagine your daughter saying, hey,
She never picks up my phone call.
let's cut that part out. Let's make it a different one.
Well, no, but the part that's funny though, again, I was saying before about the really hard part about being a good parent is how do you let your kids suffer? When's the right time to do that?
Yeah.
And the other part that is connected to that I think is easier when the child's of the opposite gender is to not make it about yourself. Like if I had a son, I said it before, if I had a son, he would wrestle, whether he liked it or not, right? That's about me. That's not about him.
Yeah.
It's about him a little bit because I think there's lessons to be learned that are worth learning, but it's a little bit about me. And I think to be an exceptional parent, the hardest thing to do is to not make it about you.
Yeah.
Things like I never put anything on my daughter. Like I might want her to come visit me for Thanksgiving or Christmas, whatever it might be. She's not going to hear that from me. She's not going to hear any disappointment that she's going to do something else because that's about me. That's not what a good parent does, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think it goes back to that concept. See, God for me he doesn't want you to do things out of obligation. It needs to be something out of love,
right?
And that's very important. He says, keep my laws in your heart. In other words, your heart is what needs to make those decisions, not forced. So when you start putting that onto people and saying, you have to, it's like, no, it has to be for that person to decide whether they want to or not. That's what God wants. He wants you to do that intentionally. And I think that's so important. And again, that relationship part. And let me tell you, what you're sharing is so important in our society today when it comes to the relationship between a father and a daughter. And I think this is so more important, a father and a daughter, because today in our society, women are being degraded. In other words, girls do not have a good relationship with their fathers, and we're having that syndrome called the daddy issues. And a lot of the women they don't know what a man is. They don't know what a husband looks like, because of the example that they have at home. And it's sad. And we see this happening. And if we don't step up as men, as fathers, as husbands, we are losing our children. We're losing the next generation. Because I guarantee you, your daughter is going to look for a husband and is going to look for those certain traits.
I mean, her friends joke with her about it. Like, a lot of her friends, kind of take crap from guys. They don't got to worry about my daughter. She takes, if anything, you got to feel bad for the guy because she's expecting him to treat her like I treat her.
Exactly.
That's going to be tough.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I think, and it's vice versa. And I think for the men as well, understanding the role of a father as a husband, how that person treats their mother. Again, the family core is important, and that again we go back to how we started. The core of everything is your family. It's your business. If that is not operating correctly, you cannot run a business. You can, but it's selfishness. It's like you can tell when somebody's just thinking about the money. You just see it. It's just ugly. It's just like, okay, it's all for you, man. Whatever. To me, that's not success. Success is a person, a man that I can see and look at and say, your home is a home that brings envy to people. In other words, I want to be like that. That's the home that I want. I want a relationship with my daughter like Dave has his daughter. I want to have that. I want to work towards that. That's the example we need to put out there.
It's I hadn't really thought about it till we were talking about it here, but part of, like I said, that kind of deal my wife and I have where we never expect the other person to do something they don't want to do.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's the same way with my daughter. And what's wonderful about that it's not why I did it, but I did it because I didn't want to put my bullshit onto her, is when she does choose to spend time with me, one, I'm almost always shocked, right? Like, really? Like, I didn't want to hang out with my parents when I was 24.
Right.
Like, at all.
Yeah.
And like, my wife and I will invite her to stuff, and we'll always be like, oh my God, she actually wants to come. And, you know, we're at Top Tier, we're doing this Top Tier Academy thing, and we're doing this little boot camp, and we're doing like a beta version of it. And I asked my daughter, again, thinking for sure, why on earth would she want to do it?
Right.
Like, oh, would you want to come to Miami and do the boot camp? Absolutely. I'd love to do that, Dad. And I was like, cool. And it's like, but it just feels so nice when you know it's their choice. There's not even a little bit of obligation. They're not doing it because they feel obligated to.
Right.
They're doing it because they want to. And this, how that feels, like I'm never questioning it because of how it's set up. It's set up in a way where, in the same way that I always make it for my daughter, say for my daughter to tell me the truth, for my dad, my brother, my wife, I make it safe. The people that work for me, I always make it safe. Like when people, somebody come to me and they say at work, I got good news and bad news. I'm like, always giving the bad news first. Always giving the bad news first. Good news can wait.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and again, I think building that healthy relationship, being honest, is the core of who we need to be. I've learned the hard way lying. As a kid, I used to be a really good liar. I used to lie about every single thing until a good friend of mine who was the bully, the strongest of the group. I was kind of the leader that people listened to. I wasn't the fighter, but he was the bulldog. He's the one that every time I had an issue, I would tell him and he would take care of it for me.
Right.
He was just ruthless. And again, I shared this in my other podcast. He fought everyone in our group except me because he knew that he would have destroyed me.
Right.
But he never fought me. And I've tried to fight him, but he was like, Roger, stop, you know? And I remember one time, and again, I used to be this compulsive liar as a kid. Because again, I always wanted to find approval. I always wanted people to accept me for what I didn't have, which is crazy. As you grow older, you start understanding this. And I remember he came to me and we're just alone. And I remember the scene and I remember exactly the location. He looked back at me. He looked at me. He said, Roger, you're a liar. You are such a liar, bro. Like, stop lying. And again, this is the strongest, meanest guy. So I'm like, okay, now it's going to happen. He's going to hurt me now. And just looking at him and just him reflecting, I'd never noticed it. The reality was that I wasn't lying and really understanding the effect of that lie. But he was being affected by it. And as I saw that in him, and I remember his expression, I said, that's it. This is going to lead to worse consequence if I continue lying. And ever since then, not that I never lied again, but it was very rare that you'll see me lying.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those are the honesties, the people that you need around you. The people that are going to tell you how it is, and they don't care what's going to happen.
This is me sounding like you. That's like God's hand.
Yeah, that was. And it was out of love though.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And it was out of love because, you know, he always had this respect for me. And even though he probably would have, you know, gave me some little little slaps and stuff like that, I would have understood that it was my fault in the sense of he wanted to correct something. It affected him, you know? And again, we have to go through that, and we have to surround ourselves with people that are going to tell us how it is. Just tell us, hey, you got cancer.
Right.
Right. It's like, hey, you got something, you know, go take care of it rather than just leave it the way it is. And hey, I just want you to be happy. You know, I don't want to ruin your day, and I don't want you to ruin my day. So I'm just going to keep it quiet.
That's, yeah, I mean, I think everyone has those pivotal moments where, you know, you have a couple paths you could take. And, you know, the thing that's important, because it's so funny, people care about other people's opinion. The part that's amazing to me is they often assign a higher value to people's opinions who they don't respect.
Right.
Which is so weird. Like, lots of people have given their opinion to me, but the people who I listen to are the people whose opinions are from people I respect, the way they see the world, the way they see me, that they can be really fairly objective. But if I think you don't, that you're kind of an idiot, your opinion not going to matter, not going to matter to me at all.
Right.
And so having people around you that you respect and admire that will be honest with you, that's critical to staying on the right path, I just think, period.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Dave, I mean, this conversation can go on, and we have a lot of conversation. This is not going to be the last. Remember, we got a lot of work to do.
Anytime.
But, what is the one thing that you would tell somebody that needs that advice? What would be that one thing? Think about that person. And I want you to think, if you're telling your daughter this,
okay,
what would be that one thing that you would tell that person? And I want you to tell me, but I want you to tell that camera right there. What would you tell that person?
You got to give me some kind of context so I can give advice about it. So many things. Like, give me I got to have some kind of frame.
What is the one thing that you love inspiring people with? What is the one thing you think people should know?
So I think I mentioned this to you once before. I think that there are three things that make us who we are. The DNA we're born to, which we don't choose, the circumstances we're born to that we don't choose, and randomness, which we don't choose. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a play off that promise I made to myself when I was in the hospital when I was 24, which is I try to be positive randomness in as many people's lives as I can possibly be. Hopefully I'm going to be that here a little bit. Yeah. But I guess the advice I would give is you gotta be honest with yourself and others. If you can do that, if you can be really honest with yourself about both your strengths and your weaknesses, both of which are hard to do. There are people I know my daughter really struggles with being honest with herself about her strengths. Her weaknesses, she has no problem admitting those to herself, but they're both important,
right?
And being honest with those people in your life about your relationship with them. Never in a hurtful way. Whenever you can avoid it, you can almost always say something in a kind way, even if it's not the nicest thing to hear. Yeah. Being honest with people, that's what's going to allow, because I don't believe you can have deep human connection without authenticity, and you can't have authenticity without honesty. So I guess it would come back to honesty.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dave, for those words and for opening up. I know there was a point of you getting emotional about your daughter, and I never, I always said, never hold back, because those are the things that inspire people. And you are an inspiration. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the podcast, but just the little time that we have together, seems like we know each other for a long time, and you've become a friend and this mentor that I've been praying about. So you are an answer from God for me. So again, sometimes we think that regardless of our ignorance or our understanding of certain things, God has a plan. God has a plan, and God is working, and God is going to put certain people in our lives that you've never expected, and he's going to do something, because it's not only about you, it's about the people around you.
Well, I feel unbelievably fortunate. And the thing that's been interesting to me is, because I also have never really had a mentor. I've had some professional mentors, but not like life mentors. And, but the next best thing is being useful to others, because it requires a deeper level of understanding things to be able to communicate them to others. Yeah. So in trying to be helpful to other people, whether it's my daughter, my wife, my friends, it's a tremendous gift to me, because it forces me, not in a negative way, but it forces me to look deeper and think more deeply than I would do normally. Yeah. And I find it tremendously helpful in my own personal growth, in my own journey.
That's awesome.
So it works for both of us.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and stay tuned, because again, this podcast is a special podcast, and I want you guys to soon. Dave, do you have an Instagram?
I do. It has 0 posts and a few followers, but you're going to help me fix that, though.
Absolutely, guys. So stay tuned. You guys are going to see a lot more of Dave. Stay tuned, because again, he's going to be sharing a lot of information about running a business, being an entrepreneur, life, so many different things. So stay tuned for Dave. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks, Roger.
Take care.